Yeah. He was the recipient of the 2023 Individual Artist Grant from the New York State Council on the Arts, and he served as publisher of Tiger Bark Press. He publishes a lot of
And
publishes,
Stephen, in fact.
he publishes Stephen and other fine poets, including Tony Levinson, who I think was here a couple months ago, and teaches creative writing at Hamilton College. So Memmer.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a drizzly, chilly night. I'm going to read a little bit from Cairns, and then I'm going to read from a newer booking project that is progress that is nowhere near finished at all. But hopefully you'll enjoy some of that too. And this up here so I know what time it is. So Cairns is a retelling of the Sisyphus story. I love working with mythology, whether it's, Judeo-Christian mythology or other kinds of mythology. And I realized before I started this project that I've written all sorts of things and engaged with various religious myths, but it never really, aside from the occasional passing mention, I've never done anything with the notion of the afterlife at all. And so I started thinking about what I would do with that, and the character of Sisyphus came to mind. And I think everyone here, of course, knows the basic story of Sisyphus, condemned for eternity to push a rock uphill in Hades, which then falls down every time he gets to the top and he has to start over. He was actually a real person. There was a real King Sisyphus who was apparently a remarkable shit. His greatest, his actual documented things were murdering brothers and murdering guests in his house, things like that. Grave sins. Mythologically, his big sin was tricking the gods in various ways. He was very crafty, and that was what earned him his fate. And so this wacky little book, I don't know how much you can see it from here, but all the poems are 44 or 45 syllables long. They're teensy little poems. There's 72 of them that make up the book. I could actually read the whole book to you in a half hour. I'm not going to do that. But they all kind of go together in a sequence, a loose sequence that has two characters, Sisyphus and his stone. So I'm going to read a bunch of these. I'm going to read them kind of straight through with maybe a couple little breaks, and then I'm going to read some of the new stuff, and we'll talk about that in the project a little bit as well. In this book, the last thing I'll say about it before I get in is that it's illustrated, which was a really fun thing for me. But John Fitzsimmons, who's an artist who lives in Syracuse, did a series of etchings for the book that function as section dividers, it was just a really fun part of the process to work with him on it and to see what he did with the poems. In recognition of my life, the gods provided me in death this mountain, this stone, and forever. We all get that. Well, what good would forever be without a mountain, a stone? Sisyphus, the stone whispers, are you awake? All day its weight tears my limbs. All night it whimpers in my ear, so that if I dream of the sorrows of stones. No, I say, I'm sleeping. The first time I scaled the mountain, those early years, here in the dark, this body-breaking stone was only a pebble. In your sandal, right now, you surely have more or less the same one. When I despair, the stone reminds me how once this path was flat, blackened plain, how someone spent their own sad forever to build rock on rock this peak. That was me, I remind the stone. We manage again the summit, almost. The view is what it is. Dim forests, dimmer clouds. Below us somewhere, crowds of the suffering. How unlike them we are, the stone says, and falls. Sisyphus asks the stone, are you awake? I dreamt, I say, that I pushed a stone up a mountain. I hope I wasn't heavy, the stone replies. It wasn't you, I say. It was some other stone. My fate, some say, is an absurdity. Well, whose isn't? In the ski lift chairs above me, perdition's couples always learn too late. They hate each other. There is no snow. They have no skis. Without someone to bear it, what is a burden anyway? Call me your stone, wails my stone. Sure, stone, I can't, shoving it onward. No, whimpers my stone. I want you to call me your stone. Once, at its request, I stepped in front of the stone, relaxed my long, cramped limbs, and waited for it to push me, and wait. I'm sorry, said the stone. I'd hoped, so did I lied. So did I. Listen, when I'm nearly at the top, beyond earshot of all you there on the ground, the stone cries out, as if it is human, as if someone else's hell is to be the weight I push. Sisyphus, the stone asks, why do you love me? Just how, I scoff, could I ever love a stone? But its weight feels strange. I didn't ask if you knew how, explains the stone. I asked you why you do. One day we agreed, just for a change, that I would climb the mountain on my own and the stone would do some stone stuff on the ground. Then, without a thought, I bent down just like always to lift the stone. Sometimes, if no one's around but children, I juggle their stones with mine before I climb on. Sometimes, at the top of a cliff, I heave my stone over my head, eclipsing death's weak sun. Atop the mountain, the gift shop and scenic car park are packed as always. Kids bicker, parents curse flat tires. The stone falls. We all stare. I still can't tell whether they're in my hell or I'm in theirs. That little poem owes an enormous debt to Mount Washington.
No.
And I've both climbed Mount Washington as a passenger in a car as a kid, but also as a hiker back when I was capable of doing such things. And it's a pretty surreal experience to hike up to the top of Mount Washington and then be surrounded by people who drove up, who are looking at you like you're insane. Why would you do this? This is a terrible idea. Flowers rise through the flames, stems scorched, parched lips open, as if even flowers sin and must atone, even bees. One sip at a blossom's scalding well, and they flare like matches. All things have a hell. Sometimes, however strong I feel, the stone won't budge. Never mind that the gods demand this labor. Never mind ages of the same blunt shove, the same hard shouldering. The stone won't sometimes, just won't. Sisyphus, the stone asks, are you awake? We need to talk, it continues, about tomorrow. There's no tomorrow, I say, just more todays. In that case, the stone says, let's talk about today. Is skipping. I watch it some days, knowing why it fell. My will was weak, my knees bent back, my damned arm broke. You were lazy, I scold myself. You were small. Most days, though, the stone falls because the stone falls. Sisyphus asks the stone, what is my name? How bare then my bloody hands seem, how stifling the air, how high the mountain, how heavy, heavy my companion. Stone, I answer, your name is Stone. If my task's the stone, what is the stone's task? I don't know, but halfway up, we stop to check its texts. Who writes you? I ask. The gods? The gods, laughs the stone, deleting them all. Who doesn't block the gods? Just out of grasp of the famished, the ripe fruit falls. Once, to spite the gods, I stopped to help, but even pity in this place is hell. All were crushed. To reach the fruit, I had to drop the stone. Hell's flowers, whatever you've heard, are more than thorns. In the foothills, my path winds through them, streams to sweet waters, and around them cool, sweet air. As in life, it's beauty that makes the rest here hard to bear. The stone is sick. About this, it says nothing, suffering for once in the way of other stones. Still I push, still it falls, though now I see, how did I not before, the weight its falling must be. What will happen to you, the stone wonders, when I am gone? We rest there for a little bit. They'll give me, I say, another stone. It isn't true. There is no other stone, but I say it. Every night, the devils go home to their families. The fires wheeze out. Cold rains weep through the smoke. I'm awake, I tell the stone, though it has not asked. I'm awake, I say again. I'm not asleep. Just a couple more of these. When, gifts in hand, the gods return to you, as they finally did to me, remember then, the only thing you lack that they can give you, they took from you already and won't give back. Sisyphus, the stone asks, are you awake? You're dead, I answer. What does it matter to you? Beneath my stiff limbs, a few pebbles smolder like souls. I'll come back, the stone says, when you're asleep. Every day, I fill my pack with stones. Every night, I drop them in the swiftest turn of the stream. Years burn off like fog. I dream often of a home built of smooth-worn stones. I never built it. Stones shaped like bread for hunger. Stones carved by waves for thirst. For loneliness, stone faces, stone words. Eat, drink, listen if you must. If you want to last, though, you'll have to learn to let the stones be stones. Sometimes, climbing this old mountain, I remember the stone. And the gods. I think also of them. What times those were. I reach the summit. I can do that now. Most times, I forget to look around. So that's Cairns, about half of it. You really can read the whole thing in half hour. Which I love. I love books you can read in one sitting, or at least sections, like half a book you can read in one sitting. There's something about experiencing a whole work at once. It's like watching a movie or something, right? So this other project I'm going to read just a little bit of is it's a funny outgrowth from the grant George mentioned that I got. One thing I've learned about myself as an artist is if anyone pays me specifically to write something, I cannot do it. I can't do writing prompts either. If someone gives me a writing, I feel guilty when I give them to my students because I can't do them.
How do you do with memorials?
I don't. Like I do them later in my own time and so on, but like I've had people ask me, oh, your cousin died or something. Can you write a poem? Like, that's not what I do. It's not how I function as a writer. I wish it was, right? But my nightmare would be being the poet laureate.
No.
Right, where like you're expected, especially in England, right, where you're expected to actually write for civic functions and things, like can't do it. And so every time, not that it's happened a lot, but on a handful of times someone has commissioned me to do something, I have always had to cheat in some way. And so with the NISCA grant, I had intended to write a whole different thing that just never happened. It was tied to Cairns, though. The original idea was that that Cairns was the first of a trilogy of afterlife books, because there's so many great characters from mythology. And what I realized was that the other characters I picked out were all not interesting, actually. They were all terrible. And the one I was starting with was Tantalus, who is condemned to be like in this pool forever, where he can't move. And whenever he wants to drink, the water goes down low where he can't get to it. And there's grapes over his head, but whenever he tries to reach them, they bounce away from him. Because he was so greedy in life. Turns out there's not a lot you can do with that, even though it's an interesting idea, because the guy never leaves. Like he's just always at least Sisyphus goes up and down, you know. So eventually, though, I got interested in trying to do something with the idea of Charon, the boatman. So these are poems from a sequence in progress called Boatman, where a Charon-like character is the voice. And these are very different formally than the ones I just read. And I'm just going to read a handful of these. They're also quick, but they're about twice the size of these other poems. And I don't know, I honestly don't know yet 100% where this is headed. I will give you a, this will come out in one of the poems, but like the basic plot is that, um, Karen has been given this job by the gods to ferry souls from one side to the other. Um, and which he has done, but he gets fed up and quits. And the souls start to pile up on the banks, waiting for something to happen. So you'll hear that along the way here at some point. And the essential job that Karen has to do is to, as this first poem will say, is to turn something that's kind of not anything into something for us mortals. There where you were, there where you'll be. And here between, not much at all. The faintest of lines defining other from other. But for you, whose lives felt like stories, well, come up with something, the gods implored me. Anything. Make them feel like it matters. And does it, I asked, the shallows cold on my heels? Anything, they said again. Just make them feel anything. Boatman, they call me, though never once have I ever offered passage, never honestly even said hello. Hello, they say, the river wide behind me, behind them, nothing they could return to. And right on time, the craft appears to us both, in whatever way they imagine it should. And we go, however they imagine we should go. One thing I love playing with mythology is all those little tidbits you get from the old stories that you can then mess with in some way or mix and match, right? Like we're like, let's throw a little Egypt in with our Greeks and with our Bible. And so there's no fare, no fee. You've paid everything you had. So enough with the coins on your tongues and on your eyes. Where exactly would I spend them and on what? And no entourage, no horses or cats or soldiers enlisted to voyage with you. We'll go alone, the ticket you were born holding folded in your fist. How could I sell you the one thing you've always owned? A ship like a city, 1,000 cabins, 22 restaurants, a ballroom, a spa. And this one soul, the whole trip, haunts the halls below deck. A pool, hot tubs and saunas, a water slide for the kids who aren't here. No one is here, just us. No porters, no concierge, not even a bartender. Make yourself at home, I tell him, and then his ride ends. One thing that Karen does as he goes through these poems is he remembers some of the various people, like in that poem, he remembers people he's carried across, both before and after he takes this little sabbatical. Um, this one girl, I don't know what you did to her. She seemed so relieved, as if never once in your air had she taken a real breath. Unbelievable here on this stifling shore. And as her bruises faded, she ran to the dock with water skis. Never once in your air that sound, as I slammed the speedboat's throttle, and she laughed and laughed and vanished and laughed and laughed. I'm not going to, not today. Let the dead stay shuffling on the dusky bank. Let the boat leak slow in the black shallows. Let the shallows dry up, the oars crack, the ridiculous life vests hang forever unused on their rusted hooks. One last bit of color for whoever looks. Faded, yes, like everything here, but color, I guess, if that still matters to you. I don't much care what happens on either shore. But when by the dozen your children arrive, hardly surprised to find themselves full of holes, that's when I dream of judgment. Then one smiles with her half of a face, tugs my sleeve. Listen up, I call, and blast my whistle. No more than 4 per brontosaurus. We know, they say. Hang on tight. We know, they say, and off they crawl. Some want to row, some want to watch from the bow. You do what you want. But the souls I remember most bait the hook and cast it far as they can into the mist. Not caring the current is stone, not caring that nothing bites. A cold bottle somehow in their hand, some friends impossibly along for the ride. Never once the line taut, never once the sun set. Thank you. A little bit of caring with it. Hopefully many more to come over the next who knows how many years.
Well, I'd like to open it up to the room, see who has questions or comments or responses for you.
What was the conversation between Karen and Sisyphus?
Yeah,
What was the conversation?
I think that it's a great question. I think that for me, it's the difference between the experience of one person who is in a predicament versus the experience of this person whose job is to help other people through the predicament. And part of what is fascinating to me about it is the uniqueness of all of our experiences and what that passage might mean to us and how that might then get filtered through this character
Right.
whose job it is to somehow make that happen. And to not just make it, but to make it something. But also then to think about what it's like to be that person who's responsible for that, which seems like a terrible thing, right? Like what an awful job in a way, but maybe also a great job, you know. There's so much of this that I'm still sorting through that I'll be very interested to see a year or so from now, you know, how it has morphed and evolved and so on. It's still like these ones I read tonight, I feel pretty good about, but there's a lot of linkages that aren't there yet.
Yeah.
Right? Like the actual, I almost feel like the guy who walks into a film producer's like office and said like, I mean, I'm trying to think of like the most famous film pitch in history, like Jaws in Space, which was the film pitch for Alien. The guy literally just walked in and said, I have an idea for a movie, Jaws in Space. They're like, we'll give you money. They hadn't written a script or anything. And I mean, it's also one of the best movies ever, but you know, it's like that's how it started, Jaws in Space. I kind of feel like that, like Bowman taking people, inventing a story for people when there's no story there. Like they're just gone. They're just gone. It's over. But no, his job is to make that into something. What's that mean? What does that turn into? So, but I know there's much more to it that I have yet to discover. Thank you.
It reminds me that, you know, what they teach you when you first study mythology in high school or college, it's like it's a projection of human consciousness, human psychology. What's interesting, poets who still use mythology, and thinking about Jennifer Franklin too, it's almost like it's the reverse. It's like you're taking the projection and reading a new human psychology into the
It goes both ways.
Are
Yeah.
you thinking of that?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I think a lot of people who, you know, they're doing work that interfaces with mythology and stuff. I mean, Louise Wick is the one I think of all time. She's one of my heroes. He's telling very kind of modern human stories through these masks, right? And they've always been masks for various kinds of stories, but because we're always changing and the world we live in is always changing, there's always something new to do with it, you know. And one thing I like to do, and you heard it in probably both of the sequences there, is that I like to mix in those modern elements to sort of remind us that these are timeless, right? Like if you think about the idea of Hades, like Sisyphus is still down there pushing his rock up the hill. Like, why would it still look like 5,000 years ago? It wouldn't, right? Like they've got Walmarts in hell now, you know, like they must, right? You know, where's everyone gonna not find what they're looking for or whatever else, right? Like, they gotta have McDonald's so people can get there and have the, you know, the ice cream machine not working, whatever, you know, thing you want to throw at it, you know. So, like mixing in, like playing with time was also part of fun for me.
Do you think about constructing different voices for different myths, or are you comfortable sort of letting your natural poetic voice kind of come out?
It's an interesting question. And I mean, there are people who write in persona who very much want it to be a character. And there are people who look at it more as a mask, and I'm very much in the latter category. I have written persona poems where I wanted it to be more like a dramatic monologue, but none of these are that exactly. Like, you know, these are all my voice, kind of whatever it is. Not my life necessarily, like it's my intellectual concerns are filtered through their very real concerns. Those aren't the same thing. But in terms of like the dramatics of it and the rhetoric of it, I'm not concerned with differentiating their speech from my speech per se. Right?
Yeah, I think it comes through very strongly in the Sisyphus poems, which feel incredibly honest.
Yeah.
Even though we're dealing with, you know, this one.
I mean, where it gets interesting to me is when we try to take that voice and then put it in form, right? Because we were joking about Charles Martin, who read for Stephen's program recently, and he's a formalist, and I don't consider myself a formalist because I don't write in traditional
That
rhyming
was another
forms,
question.
but I write religiously in creative forms. So, you know, the Karen's poems are in a sort of carefully hidden but also carefully constructed syllabic form. It has a lot of leeway. I have the number of syllables per line doesn't have to be consistent. It's the number of lines and number of syllables per poem that has to be consistent. The new thing is also it has a syllabic component to it, but it's spread over much more time, so it's even less apparent. But there's also sort of a middle of the line caesura in every line that you know is kind of the closest I've ever gotten to concrete poetry. Like there is that side and that side in the poems themselves on the page. So, you know, playing with those things is tremendous fun for me. But, you know, in terms of constructing the voice, you have to do it for me because I'm giving myself this headache. You know, how do I both construct the voice but also make it work in these constraints? And I think the secret of form, of course, is that those constraints are what make the voice. The voice wouldn't exist without those constraints. It would be something else.
Well, how do you go about creating, like, one thing I've noticed with your stuff is there's a lot of visual imagery that seems to really come out and jump out at you. So how do you go about creating?
I love hearing that because I don't always think of myself as a very image-driven poet. I tend to think of rhetoric more than anything else, and just the voice itself. But of course, sometimes the voice is drawing pictures for people.
Oh, I had the total, the fishing thing, I had the total
Yeah.
image of like the annoying fishing trip where you never catch anything.
But that you're having a great time anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what I will say is, I think that, a huge part of my, when I was first starting to write poems, I was also a film student. And so, an actual, like, I'm old enough that this was actual, like, 16 mm film, cutting and taping film together and stuff. And that process for me had more to, that and theater, those two things together had more to do with how I write poems than anything else. And so there's that visual component to it. I think of my poems both in terms of how they move rhythmically, but also in terms of what they're doing cinematically. I want them to be like little movies.
That's incredible to hear. One of the things I do with my students going through poetry and creative writing classes, I have them make a video poem for their poem,
Yeah.
and then use the video poem to revise the original written poem. And the two things that we talk about are imagery naturally,
Right.
and rhythm, and how you cut lines to the images in your video. And I thought maybe I was losing, like, I was just shouting.
No,
I was just on a sort of poetic bend, like, nope, nobody cares, this is stupid.
I wish that every poet could have the experience, even if it was just for like a week or something, of actually cutting old fashioned film and trying to make something with it, right? Like, it's, even with video editing, it's different. It's so much more immediate and less physical. But like, it taught me so much about just time, right? With the experience of a piece of art, and also the freedom to move stuff around. I'm gonna take this line and move down here, just like I would have taken this shot and moved it down here. But yeah, I mean, it's, for me, most poems, that's a wild generalization, for me, a lot of poems at least fall apart on that, right? They might have figured out pacing up the line across the page, they haven't figured it out down the page. And of course, alternately, it's the other way around. They got the general rhythm of the piece, but they haven't figured out the music within the piece. Those two things are like the biggest sins to me for poems. And I don't read a poem out loud, so I feel like I figured that out for that individual poem. I'm nowhere close to figuring out for this book. I have so much more to write. Probably 100 more of those little poems before I feel like I've figured that. But on a poem by poem basis, that's, for me, that's when I know it's done. Everyone asks, how do you know when a poem's done? It's when I feel like it has that sort of cinematic rhythmic quality to it.
I would imagine that's a later revision process.
Oh yeah, it's not the first or fifth draft. You see,
Some people have alleged that Lucifer is the hero of Milton's Paradise Lost.
sure.
I'm about to allege that the stone is the hero
Oh, yeah.
of your parents.
Yeah.
Just based on the number of repetitions of the word stone.
The fun thing about Karen's is it has this Dr. Seuss vocabulary. Like, there are no serious words in the book. It really is like, it's this elemental kind of language, and the word stone is just over. I think it's called rock twice. Every other time it's called stone. It's just over and over, stone. But after 70, even after like 15 of them, so it starts to have this almost like hypnotic kind of quality to it. But the stone is definitely the better person.
Well, we have in our landscape, we have boulders, of course, which are pieces of the Canadian Shield that were peeled off and sanded down and deposited in a landscape, the erratic, so-called. I think it's an interesting word too.
Oh yeah.
An erratic. What's erratic about a big boulder in landscape?
not much normally, but
It's very direct.
for me, I mean, the reason it was stone instead of any of the other various words you could have used is just the stone sounds so good. That bow sound. Musically.
Yeah,
So much better than rock or,
it's got more gravitas.
yeah.
Yeah. So how about the title? What's the title of the book?
The title for the new one or the Karen's?
Can't either.
Yeah, so for Karen's, I came up with a title fairly early on, actually. I've written about a dozen or so. And showed it to a friend of mine, another wonderful poet, Dina Lynette, that we published in Tiger Bark. And she gave me some nice feedback on it. I sent it out to a literary magazine. They published this initial chunk of like 8 of them, whatever it was. And then a little while later, she wrote me and said, hey, what's going on with that book of yours? And I had called that initial chunk of the poems Karen's, thinking it was just kind of a longish poem, but nowhere near even a chapter. It was just, it was like 80 pages long. And she said, how's that book of yours coming? I'm like, what book? She's like, that thing you showed me. I'm like, oh, that's not a book, that's just a poem. And then I started thinking. And the name Karen's just stuck. I love that idea of stacks of stuff. So, there is a poem that does mention Karen's at one point in the book of manuscript, but it's also the poems on the page look kind of like Karen's, which was also a little bit of it. There are these little, they vary poem by poem how they're structured, but they're always 8 lines, even if they may look like more on the page due to typography and stuff, but they're always 8 lines, 2 4-line stanzas that are broken up in various ways. But they had this little stack of stones kind of quality. So that it just stuck.
I call it gravestones myself.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I never found another title I liked better, so that just stuck around.
Were you, okay, the word Karen's, as I'm thinking of that word, certain words make you think of, as you're writing, make you think of other poets or other poems maybe. Which other poets or poems did you have in mind while you were writing?
Oh gosh. Some of the Chinese poets, Li Po and Cuckoo to some extent, and others. I don't think if there are others that like very specifically.
Robert Burns.
Not so much, just because he sounds so different and, so wonderful in his way, but very different era than Holder, I've loved Louise Glick's voice since I first started writing poems. She was one of the first poets I ever read, and just her sort of deceptively straightforward voice. I've always admired. Though again, her poems tend to be much longer. These are also tight, and aphorisms in general, like just that kind of like anything that's short like that. There's some Frost wrote lots of like 4 and 6 line poems. Like the Fire and Ice sort of style poem that has a sort of plain spoken quality to it, but also these kind of rhymes that are looping around, and how quickly can you do something impactful? Short poems. I mean, the secret in a way is that I wasn't writing short poems. I was writing a very long poem that was broken up in little short chunks, and so it didn't feel like writing a poem like Fire and Ice, for instance. Like, how does anyone even do that? Like that short, tight, magical poem is something most poets don't do anymore. You don't see that kind of poem in literary.
There's not, it's interesting, I wonder, because I know a lot of poets who do, but there doesn't seem to be any mark.
They're hard to pull off. I mean, like every once in a while you'll see one in the New Yorker or something. Right.
Yeah.
But both are doing different things. For me, it was a combination of how can I both write in this really tight form, which I'd never written anything short before ever. I mean, this was, in fact, the previous couple of books, like the poems are all like 2 to 4 pages. They're all, they're shortish lines, but they're all pretty long poems. And so part of the fun was how do I do these little micro poems, but then how do I make them each do something too? Like I didn't want them just to be like, oh, here's a nice little image. I wanted every one of them to in some way punch you in the gut, along the way. And hopefully most of them, or make you laugh in a few cases, but maybe uneasily. But
There's a lot of whimsy there.
Yeah, it's a funny, the book has a lot of humor. I mean, it ultimately,
Mhm.
it's pretty sad at the end, but even then it kind of has some humorous bits in the end. But yeah, I don't know, I like for my reader to be laughing as I'm twisting the knife. You know, that's my ideal situation is both those things happening at once.
Anybody have?
Wendell Berry has quite a bit of stone in some of his poems.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Being a farmer.
It's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm gonna wake up and
Wait,
be
wait,
like,
stone.
oh, that poet is the one who could have said that, I was also, thinking about when I wrote these, but, I'm drawing a blank, but, definitely leaning towards just basic, starkness was something I had in mind.
Are you at all, do you read or are you at all interested in fantasy?
Oh, yeah.
writing?
Mhm. Yeah. I love sci-fi and fantasy, and, um, when I was a kid, if I thought I was gonna be a writer, I was gonna be writing that sort of stuff, never have done it really, but I guess this is my version in a way.
Hear that in your tone, I'm thinking about Jerry LaFeminine.
Oh, yeah, Jerry,
Jerry's voice sort of reminds me of yours.
Jerry's a good buddy.
So, yeah. I guess, I mean,
I get to hear you all. Enough of me.
yeah, thank you, I mean,
Thank you.
Yeah, I
And
appreciate
thanks for the
it.
good questions.
Cairns is for sale up there.
Yes, I can help you with
See
that.
Phil, and, we'll take a little bit of a break. Thank Phil, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, no, don't.
Why do it?
What are you, Larry?
It's my series, damn it.
Damn straight.
Ah. Well, I love the.
You changed your signal.
It just did. It's when I first realized that coming back like that was gonna be the device, that was sort of the big thing. And then it's okay, how many times can I use? How frequently can I say stone without it being
I
wrong?
think that's right. Just give into it.
Yeah, that was it. And then kind of one of the other thing that really, can't remember at what point, they were like, I'm sure it's when you're writing a novel, it's a similar kind of thing too, but there were those moments along the way where they did something and like, oh, that is something that has to happen. Like the ski lift changes is the one. Okay, that was the first one that had a water. Again, I need to do that a few times. And when the stone asked Cisco to do this, like, oh, that needs to happen multiple times, like that needs to get through.
What's that principle? Yeah, the book, like, what's the principle of the unified collection? And it's hard to, I was talking about promotion committee today for another poet, Rob Oster. And, Rob's books have been really thematically. Again, and it's hard to explain that to other people, like why that's sort of the core of poetry right now, is that sort of book. Versus, I think it's a different appeal, right? Or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think on some level, people are starting to get a little weary of, not that they're weary of the books themselves, I think they're weary of the notion that people think you have to.
Yeah.
And, there's a part of me that misses the days where you could just be like, hey, Philip Memmer, poems in 1980, 1990, and that was your book, and it didn't have to have a theme, and it didn't have to have any coherence and so on. But that's just not what publishing is doing. And, but there's so many ways to construct a book. And, and, I mean, I've even seen people who, they send it too.
Oh, okay.
Unless you don't want me to.
No, I do actually.
Who, people who will, like, oh, yeah, my book has 4 sections. So it looks like they're doing something, but really what it is it's just their it's their stuff. They're writing about the stuff they write about. It hangs together enough that it makes sense, but they're not, the 4 sections don't actually meet. Right, like, which is smart, I think, like, trick the reader, make them think this section means something. They'll read it over and over again, trying to figure it out. And
It's big project.
yeah, amazing. But I found that for whatever reason, my first two books were 100% just collections. 40 poems or 50 poems, and like they had little themes and they were broken into sections, but I didn't set out to write it. And now that's just what I do.
It's a different kind of pleasure to
Yeah.
read. To me, it's a really different experience to read this sort of collection.
I think
One is like discovery and like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, it's like, and they want to be read in different ways too. Like this is a book that wants you to read it covered in a row. And if you can do it once, it's even better. And there's others that again, just kind of flip through them. You read it today, and I'll read page 12 tomorrow, and page 8 the day after, and page 30 the day after that. It doesn't matter. And that's so great. It's all great. You know, it's all. And I do have, you know, the occasional poem pops out that has nothing to do with anything. And they're just sitting in a pile waiting for their day. You know, like someday I'll figure out what to do with, you know.
Or the cats.
Yeah, exactly. I have a poem sitting in a drawer at home that's sardonically pretending to give advice to all the apostles who, you know, they got themselves murdered in various ways. And like, it has nothing to do with anything else, right? Like at some point, it'll be like a new poem and a new encyclopedia. But it's just like on its own, it's this lonely little poem that sounds like nothing else I've ever written. And
Yeah.
someday, someday,
Sure.
maybe.
There's enough.
For now.
Give me a-
I want to tell a story first.
Story, man.
I was taking notes while you were reading, Phil, about the story that the Seneca tell. Of course, you come from the area of the Standing Stone, Bull Knight.
Oh, yeah.
The Seneca tell a story, the origin of stories. It's about an orphan, as many of their stories are someone who's kind of outside the regular structure of the group. So he was a young boy, and he was sent out to hunt, to learn to hunt. So he was shooting small birds to bring them back later on to make soup or something out of them. But middle of the day came and he was tired. And where he was hunting, probably in the area of Bear Hill, beside Canandaigua Lake, he found a big standing stone. So he sat in the shadow of the stone and he got out the food that he'd been given. And as he was resting there, the stone said to him, "Would you like to hear a story?" So you approached that, you came close to that earlier in that poem.
It's really interesting, unintentionally, of course, you know, 'cause I hadn't heard that particular story, but
Well,
these things
if
come back.
the stone is going to be the hero of the story, the stone has a story too.
Mhm.
So, so this is called Touch Me Not, which is the name of a plant that often grows where poison ivy grows, and it's, if you mash it up and rub it on, it will give you some relief from poison ivy, especially if you do it immediately. And they're both right there side by side. Often. Touch me not. out for a walk on a day between summer and fall. I meet an old man coming my way, walking on a stick. When he sees me ahead, he withdraws to the creek side and plants himself comfortably on the naked body of a huge dead elm cut while dying and left there. I point out poison ivy vine, but he says, "You don't bother me." We've both chosen to walk this crisp sunny day on a trail built over an old rail bed right by a creek headed to the lake. He's Bob and was a house builder. He names the subdivision near the lake where he built the first street of houses. We talk about our gardens in terms of bushels of potatoes and tomatoes, what uses we plan for them. We parked, he at his car, and I for the rest of my walk another mile home. Pause at a primitive memorial, handmade white cross and painted stones, invoking the Lord's help for Jeremy, a handicapped Mennonite boy who drowned in a little pool here, got in and tangled, couldn't get out. I saw emergency services removing his body, but didn't know his name until today. Downstream, several trees produce a whole pile of hard green walnuts, bombs or missiles. Take one to hold and grasp hard for odor memory crushed under wheels of plumbers' trucks in my grandparents' backyard, near the piles of scrap pipe and galvanized wash tub full of crayfish, living and dead, kept for bait. Numerous shoulder-high groves of yellow jewelweed or pale touch me not grow luxuriantly on wet ground, mostly water themselves, kept even wetter by this wet summer, reaching out with swollen seed pods to be touched. Touching them causes a squirming in my hand, an involuntary explosion, scattering seeds far and wide, ensuring more jewelweed next year. I can't forego the touching. In Jeremy's name, my right hand squeezes walnut for scent. Fingers of my left hand feel the plant fibers writhe alive, promising to live yet again. I thought when I wrote this, I was describing an experience, which I was, but when I showed it to some friends, they connected with certain myths of living and dying, or dying and living, either way. So I kept it rather than putting it into the junk pile.
Yeah.
Don. And then you got some new stuff.
Got some new stuff.
New shit.
What's that?
New shit.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I've only been writing for about a year and a half now, and I've been coming to this series, and like I just love coming and sharing with all you guys. You guys are really cool people, and I enjoy it, and I enjoy meeting all the new authors. It's amazing. But the really cool part is I feel like my poetry is evolving, and I got into it originally dealing with some anxiety and some health issues as a way of coping. And at first it was very negative. is very like down, but now it's starting to change a little bit, like the emotion behind it, the feeling behind it, is starting to change, so. So I have this one. Misery loves company. What if company is miserable? Smile like you mean it, but as long as you mean it when you smile. If you don't, then remember hope floats. Just don't float your hope down the toilet. But if you do, look both ways before you cross the street. Don't look both ways after you get paid. Lastly, a penny earned is a penny saved, but that's a boring life.
You have to read a little slower.
A little slower.
A little slower and get.
That's one thing I'm trying to work on is like my presentation,
Yes.
like trying to figure out how to do it.
Read it again.
Okay. Misery loves company, but what if company is miserable? Smile like you mean it, as long as you mean it when you smile. If you don't, then remember hope floats. Just don't float your hope in the toilet. But if you do, look both ways before you cross the street. Don't look both ways after you get paid. And lastly, a penny earned is a penny saved. That's a boring life.
Do you mind if I read that to you?
What's that?
May I read that to you?
Absolutely.
I have to see it.
Absolutely.
This is called going to school.
Heck yeah, I'll take whatever helps.
Okay.
This is the fun part of it. I'll kind of take a front row seat.
Because you're just, up here saying things that are really, yeah. Okay. Mystery loves company. But what company is misery? Smile like you mean it, and I've lost it. As long as you mean it when you smile. If you don't, then remember hope floats. Just don't float your hope in the toilet. But if you do, look both ways before you cross the street. Don't look both ways after you get hit. Lastly, a penny earned is a penny saved. But it's also a morning march. Very nice stuff.
So then they have another one. And I promise, guys, I'll work on presentation.
It takes time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it does, and I've been doing it since I was born, so.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you. Dream a simple dream, as easy as it would seem. But then I watched the news, and I nearly blew a fuse. It seems like everything to date is filled with anger and hate. Who is willing to go the extra mile just to make others smile? How do I ever accomplish such a feat? I am preoccupied with making sure that I have something to eat. Still, I soldier on down the road, even though many have turned into a miserable toad.
God. You did something
Right.
for us?
Well, try. So I did it last week and I'm gonna do it again. I found the two poems from a new book, which will be here next time I show up. The new book, it's supposed to go together, they weren't written together. There's a second one, was written well before the first one, but the first one leads into the second. The book is about a place I grew up in Baltimore. Interesting place that was first bought in 1898 by an African American numbers person, who was trying to get away from his competition in Baltimore. So he moved outside the town. He set up this area which was formerly woods. What he didn't realize that woods was in the, the path of some creature who'd been around for more than 100 years. And that creature it had a habit of taking children when he could find them, eating them. Creatures called snallygaster, which is roughly Dutch for quick ghost. And this worked well until about the early 20th century, when this man had bought this land, had imported some Africans over to be his guards, because nobody in town knew them, and Baltimore knew them. And a demigod came with the Africans. And so those two got in conflict. Well, that's the outer theme of the story, but there are all these other stories in here. My family moved there in 1948, when I was 5. 2 years after my father left the Second World War, 3 years before the Second World War. So let's see if I can't read the first of these poems. It's called Guardians. 7 a.m. Mom and Dad at work, while I, age 11, search for their secrets while watching a University of Maryland physics program on their bedroom TV. Our 20 by 40 2-story Baltimore row house was typical. Bedrooms and bathrooms, second floor, living room, dining room, and kitchens, first floor. Nothing found in the closets. Nothing under the separated single beds. Mom's ugly bureau is painted boat green. Her underwear is embarrassing. I don't touch. Dad's old gray bureau has sharp edges. In its lower drawer, neatly placed underwear are not in the disorder I favor. My dad's phone was in the desk drawer facing the nylon frames in the basement. So a pillow under the dresser bottom was a surprise. And what Dad brought home from World War II. The trench knife and .45 revolver stirred someone within my breast. For years after, they showed up in dreams, saving me from bad men and alien monsters. How that knife could now slice a bully's tongue and pointing finger. How flying bullets would open their eyes. Recalling tears unleashed by bully twin terrors at school. The hard, cold steel sought my hold until I need to have it in my callous favorite left hand. This is the gun Dad brought out. Bang, 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 when Wace knocked at the door at night or threw something at our home. When gunfire happened at the community center, I thought horror, not guns. When cops bang scared us street corner singers, I ran. The next year I beat up the twin bullies one at a time with my fists. 6 years later, I just talked with my buddy who stole my gal. Oh, strong, brave knight, you are too sharp. Oh, beloved gun, there are no cowboys around. I better not hold you beyond my dreams. The Guardians. second one was called The Fight. Two 15-year-old smart, college-bound boys and a 14-year-old race with a long gait. Of course, it was over a girl. Cookie drove past my house daily after school. Curiously, I thought whether I might accompany her home. I did past addicts shooting and dicing in Gambler's Woods, down blocks of hateful white folks' houses, under the viaduct of the Black Methodist College, over the snowy stream where dead men lay sometimes, up the gentle rise to her middle-class teacher's home. On football-less days, I saw her. Cookie loved literature. I loved sci-fi. We walked and talked and laughed about books, music, and future plans. Together, ninth grade Cookie and I shared each first date. I, a 10th grade wide, thick football running back, became hers after a year of hanging out. On her family room couch, to my widening Virginia eyes, Cookie's whispers, when my parents leave town, we might do it. Witches of something serious were not yet understood by this pair. Lanky basketball forward Tony was better looking and my longtime taller best friend. Tony had seen Cookie and called her too plain. Over a year later, we three attended a start of summer party. There Cookie said, I want to dance with Tony. I watched as the two swayed and swayed and then kissed. Cookie declared, Tony will walk me home. Something irrelevant and impure entered me that night. Call it an honor that had little to do with Cookie or whatever she had whispered. I looked for and found my father's war tool in the rear of the basement desk facing the line of trains. Not the gun, but the one next to it with the hungry blade. I didn't think someone will be hurt. On this hot, moonless June night, I knew Tony's expected route home. Crouching patiently behind bounding bushes for Gambler's Woods, I waited, seeming like 2 hours, with tight-gripped trenching knife. As Tony neared the bushes, I leapt out. In car lights, Tony saw the glistening metal, and I saw Tony's raised bat-like stick. Muscles rigid, feet balanced to the front, we faced. Tony said through tight jaws, hey man, she asked me to. Out of the night's character, we became thinkers, yelling, this is stupid. By speaking loudly enough, our bodies believed it. Our sinews remembered teamwork. Our emotions remembered friendship. What we finally did was important. The dropped, unfed blades, flat side, kissed Tony's sneakers. The thick branch rolled in the road. We smiled, neither spoke. I walked the 4 blocks to his house before, before either saw Cookie again. All three graduated from college.
That house in 1940.
I read both of ones here, but not same night.
Right.
Yeah.
It's gonna be 6 weeks before we do another one of these. It'll be May 30th. It'll be a couple more poets from Erie, yay, Chuck Joy, Ray Brown will come in and join us. But just gonna put this out there, in 2 weeks, we are doing something that is, say it's totally near and dear to my heart anymore, but the first time I ever read a poem in public was the American Poets Cafe for a poetry slam. And then years later, I did a slam for college poets in New York City. And so my wife knows this and has taken it upon herself to start a poetry slam series here, of which I will be the inaugural, but I hope not permanent host. In 2 weeks, on the 25th, of Friday. If anyone's in the area, no, it's a long ride for you, but if anyone else is in the area and wants to come and judge,
I think John is ready.
John, I
We
recruited,
hope we have
I
kids.
recruited my son.
I can't,
Huh?
I can't come.
That's okay. I mean, I think we're probably trying to get some, maybe even some student judges. We'll see what happens. I'm not in charge of.
The only rule for slam judges is there are absolutely no qualifications. We literally used to pull people off the street on the Bowery. So that's gonna be in a couple of weeks. I just want to get that out there. All right. I'm gonna read a couple of poems. One kind of pulls in a lot of themes that have been on my mind lately for really obvious reasons. I don't have any courtroom poems, but this is one of them. It's called Pleading to the Charges. The clerk, once a heartbreaking beauty and still fit, follows the Spanish translation like a derelict exchange student at a Barcelona bar. Like a girl I knew who also had a scar she wore like a lace petty line with gold spiked beads. She's got more lights than a wandering eye, so I let mine land in her lap. The rotunda is full of alligator tails, sly as the judge. I followed as far as his woeful laugh lines, so her smile knows my day will end in just a slap on the wrist, while Diego Valdez, the gentleman to my left, will have to plead to an illegal right on red, a reduced charge carrying a fine that would keep his village in tortillas for a month. I want to explain to her, as with eyes closed and me inside, as she tries to forget herself, as she tries to forget why she still works here, taking pats on the ass from greasy judges, she comes, as though it were penance for a broken taillight. Diego nudges me as she walks by again, but I know she wouldn't dress it in decorum. If I were down in the bar at the Purple Frog, she'd say to a girlfriend over a pale ale draft, loud enough for me to hear, I don't fuck Mexicans. They're always looking for something, implying to the right gringo, she'd be a pot of gold. The world outside this courtroom is all profanity, so I came to plead not guilty to the charges, to seek mercy from a robed man who understands my cheap suit and desires and how ambitions die. When I approach the bench, she catches my eye and sees a man who can sit here on a Tuesday night, but also something of a Mexican. Am I wifeless with this gray hair, so pressed I can't just pay the price of a dinner out of laborer's wage? She appears again as I stand in the cashier's line and doesn't say, I like what you told the judge, all except the end. Instead, she waves my folder in the air, looking through me the way a searchlight scans the perimeter for signs of an escape. That's an odd poem. If you've ever had to sit in traffic court
Oh, yeah.
for hours, it's how I passed my time in traffic.
Had an order that was semi-finalist in the World Slam Poetry Contest.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's really good.
it's another art form.
Yeah,
Just say
I know.
it is.
And I was a judge of that, not in the one she was in. And I found that, which I didn't have a feeling for, performance was much more important than poetry.
Right.
And that bothered me, I was
And
a
those
bad judge.
But then there are those times when you get both.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it blows you away, but
Yeah.
it is rare.
Yeah,
It's pretty rare. This, as I told Phil, I had a little minor surgery, so I had 2 weeks where I got to sit in a recliner. Which is like terrible on one hand, on the other hand, wow, it's a read for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I was reading all this Russian history for my next project, and I was thinking about the Count Tolstoy death story. Does anybody know the Leo Tolstoy? So Tolstoy became a major religious figure in Russia for the last 2 decades of his life, and wrote only really, he wrote other things, but mostly polemic tracts about spirituality and, you know, sort of a mysticism. And he had a terrible marriage at the same time. And when he was 82, he decided basically that he needed to get away and sort of redeem his spirit. So he went to this monastery that was famous in Russia for this sort of pilgrimage. He just left the house, got on a train, went to the monastery, found some spiritual renewal, got back on the train, got sick on the way, and died in the train station on the way back home at 82 years old. Right. So that's the best. Fear and peace. When I think I'll lose my mind, I think of Tolstoy in Final Flight to Obtina Pushkin. I think of my mother on the Belt Parkway doing 75 at 75 to park where she might slip on ice. No train like Tolstoy's. I like to think she thought of Anna Karenina's fate every time she fobbed her Buick and squeezed between fence and driver's side. She could climb in, and will I? Didn't Tolstoy have a troika? She wanted another 10 years. And when I think of another 10 years, I think of that actor who worked just 5 years ago and now has forgotten his own name. As though it were a line in the script I'm afraid of, the one he's playing. When I think of him playing Tolstoy, I laugh the way we laugh when we recall my mother telling us to go scratch, when we said we worried about her driving the way Tolstoy probably told his wife in Russian, like my mother would have heard in Brooklyn as she labored up and down the block, waiting to remember where she parked her car. I think of Tolstoy on the platform, afraid of death, yet wanting to remain conscious to the destination through the pain. This is one thing Tolstoy actually wanted to do. He didn't want to sort of slip away. He wanted to be there at the moment of death. Now, what he was going to do with this information of what happened at the moment of death once he was dead, I'm not really sure, but it was a conscious effort. So,
Wow.
And thank you for indulging me. And this is my attempt not to follow tradition and not to follow that Ellie Sloboda, who is going to get up here and do her thing now and eclipse the rest of us.
Oh, it's not a big deal.
And she's preaching in my poetry series
Yes,
in 2 weeks.
That's
No, no,
right.
or this weekend, that's right.
well, it's coming up. Okay, so yesterday, I'm still working on dealing with the pulmonary embolism. So I had a meeting with my PCP yesterday, and there was a young intake nurse. And she was concerned that I was cold because I had on these shoes. And so that prompted a conversation on, she also likes to wear sandals as much as she can, and I said, well, I actually like to go bare feet. And when I was young, I just didn't like to wear any clothes, and I like to be outside, and I just didn't think of myself as a person. So I still rebel against having anything on my feet. However, I have to admit that I shattered a garden globe in my kitchen, and I thought I had it all swept up, and I thought, well, I really should wear sandals in the kitchen just in case. And then, of course, the next day I forgot, and then there was a big so $45 copay later at the podiatrist. And that's okay, but it pisses me off that I didn't listen to myself. I often don't listen to myself. So that conversation about being a child brought to mind a poem that or a song that I wrote 2 years ago, I think it was. And some of you heard it, and some of you have not. And we'll see if I can remember it. When I was a child, it should look like. When I was a child, person so wee, I was less so a girl, and more so a tree, or a bird flying high, a flower so bright, a soft gentle breeze, a star in the night. I wasn't a person, it gave me no worth. I delighted in being a part of the earth. Now I am a grown person, so old, and less so a girl. My story's been told, but sometimes I sing and sometimes I bloom. Wind blows through my window, stars shine in my dreams. I am a person who has lots of work, yet I will delight in being part of the earth. So I feel like I've lived a good life. I've done a lot. I had a singing telegram company, speaking of writing to order. And I'm the poet of Livonia, speaking of writing to order, and, so I've had this long life, but I, would be just as happy if I didn't wake up tomorrow. And that's not to get sympathy or anything, it's just a matter of fact. But I had a waking thought that said, that lessons last week, there is much to do before I call it quits. I must explore the numerous possibilities of sharing songs and poems of trees and other miracles of earth, those things that give our lives much more. As I keep thinking, I've got to do that Earth Day thing. It won't be this year because Earth Day is coming in a couple of weeks. But next year, I swear I'm gonna do this Earth Day program.
Yeah, Arbor Day, quite close to that too. You want to plant a tree. Let's say Arbor
Yes,
Day.
Arbor Day is right following.
Yeah.
I think it's the 25th this year. Yeah, it's really soon. So all this is, April's good. So then I said sigh, weather's changing, ice shelves from the sea is rising. This is bad behaviors. Big denying. Earth in crisis. So I cry a lot, but this is one of the reasons. And then the state of the earth, or the state of the nation, another thing that's, a lot of tears go down. But outside my window, I have a spruce wall. And there are squirrels out there in those trees, and I just love watching those squirrels. So I wrote this poem about saucy squirrels, but it's the first part is, I wish I were a saucy squirrel navigating those trees. I'd scamper up and down those trunks with free natural ease. And if the branch that I was on reached a sudden end, I'd jump into another one, and I would ascend. I'd run up to the tippy top. I'd pause and look around. I think, it was not long ago that I was on the ground. But I am not a saucy squirrel. My journey's not so quick. I don't like to move at all. Actions, such. Okay. So that's the spoken version. Now this is the sung version. Wish I were a saucy squirrel navigating trees. I scamper up and down those trunks with carefree naturally. And if the branch that I was on reached a sudden end, I'd jump yet to another one, and then I would ascend. I'd run up to the tippy top, I'd pause and look around. I think it was not long ago that I was on. But I am not a saucy squirrel. My journey's not so swift. I'm glad when I can move out. Actions such. Now Sylvia wrote an instrumental piece to that, but I didn't bring Sylvia tonight, and if y'all want to hear it, you gotta come to Geneva. Please. So I'll take Sylvia. Sylvia, yeah, for those of you who don't know Sylvia, I played Mountain Dulcimer, I have several, but Sylvia's my first one. She quite often is the boss of the place. In fact, last time we had here, she took over, I mean, she made me screw up my spoken stuff just so that she could get there.
Yep. It was quite an event.
She was, I'm telling you.
Wow.
So anyway,
Thank you, Beth.
I have happy spring, happy spring, happy spring.